In 1930s New York, a nickel could take you anywhere. 5 cents in the slot, the turnstile clicked, and the subway swallowed you whole, steel, sparks, and the smell of hot brakes. If you missed your stop, no panic. Another nickel, and you were a king again. That's how the city taught you. Keep a coin in your pocket and your eyes open. Rent? If you split a cold water flat with 2 cousins, you could get it down to a few bucks a week. The wallpaper peeled like sunburn. The radiators hissed like snakes. And in winter, the windows frosted from the inside. We kept a pot of water on the stove to fake humidity and coffee on the boil to fake comfort. Worked most days. Bread was a dime, coffee a nickel. If you had a quarter in your palm, you could be fed, warmed, and reading yesterday's news by noon. The automat took nickels, and your pride, no waiter, no questions. You pressed your nose to a little glass door, pointed at lemon pie or creamed spinach, and the city handed it over, clean as a church confessional. I wasn't always an old man with a soft hat and slower feet. Back then I was young, fast, and useful. Useful matters. The Castellammare's business had just burned out too many funerals, too many mothers in black, and the smart guys decided we needed rules, meetings, committees, if you know what I mean. We called it peace, and for a while, it held as well as anything in this town. Prohibition staggered to the end in '33, but don't let anyone tell you the party only started there. We were already dancing. Raincoats that smelled like rye, trucks that smelled like trouble. Speakeasies hid behind soda shops, phosphate in the window, piano in the basement. A knock was 3 slow, 2 quick. If you knocked wrong, you got silence. If you knocked right, you got a smile, a glass, and a reminder to keep your mouth shut. After repeal, the doors didn't creak anymore, they swung. Overnight bootleggers turned into businessmen with tuxedo doormen and ice buckets that matched the curtains. A few of us got our names printed on liquor licenses, which was funny, because some of us never learned to spell them too good. Paper covers a lot of sins. Uptown, Harlem was night school. Everybody learned something. The Savoy bounced like a trampoline, and if you couldn't Lindy, you hugged the rail and clapped. Duke made the horns talk. Chit made the drums laugh. I carried envelopes in and out of the back rooms, where numbers were written on slips no bigger than a matchbox. A penny here, a nickel there, added up to a mountain with our footprints on the side. Down on Mulberry and Mott, the Sunday air smelled like garlic, shoe polish, and mass. Old men in newsboy caps argued over soccer scores nobody else in America cared about. Pushcarts fought for curb space with kids playing stickball. A broom was third base. A manhole cover was home. If the ball hit the truck, it was a double, unless the driver knew your uncle, and then you negotiated. We didn't lock doors so much as we knew which ones not to open. You learned the city by ear, the honest racket of the elevated train, the dishonest whisper behind a door, the exact clink of 2 glasses that meant a debt got recognized and not yet paid. Cops knew where to walk and when to whistle. G-men had suits too clean for the neighborhood and shoes that didn't know how to scuff. A new suit on Orchard Street, $20 if your cousin vouches. Wide lapels, shoulders, you could lean a plan on. Hats were mandatory. Tilt said confidence. Brim said caution. A man without a hat was either in a hurry or not from here. Women wore coats with big buttons and carried pocketbooks like they were guarding the city charter. They were tougher than we were, and prettier about it. Cars? If you had one, you weren't rich, you were lucky. A Packard purred, a Ford coughed, a Studebaker looked like it wanted to apologize. I drove a borrowed sedan that stalled if you looked at it funny. Still, you could fit 4 friends, 2 crates, and 1 future in the back. We parked nose out, just in case the night changed its mind. Work was anything a man could live with and a man could forget. Docks at dawn, ice house at noon. The WPA gave some of us shovels and time clocks. The rest of us invented our own time. A handshake could hire you, and a handshake could fire you. You learned to read fingers as well as faces. We measured the skyline by our necks. The Empire State finished, and 31 stuck a pin in the clouds. You couldn't help looking up. Radio City opened and taught us that velvet could be a building material. The subways ran under all of it, like veins under a boxer's skin. At night, the street lights were halos for whoever needed to feel holy a minute. Money was shy and quick. The Depression made us humble in the morning and hungry by afternoon. Breadlines wrapped around corners like the city was hugging itself to stay warm. Nobody admitted need admitted you. We passed coins the way you pass a secret. Quietly, with eye contact. $1 meant somebody ate. 5 meant somebody slept without moving their shoes under the bed for warmth. You want the truth? A lot of us carried 2 calendars. One had Sundays and saints, weddings and christenings. The other had names and numbers, pickup times and drop spots, a list of bars you entered from the back because the front was too famous. It wasn't romance, it was labor. We kept ledgers. We balanced them. The boys from Jersey ran trucks across the river like they were sneaking a moon across the sky. Long Island had docks that forgot to be watched on Wednesdays. Queens gave you space. Brooklyn gave you muscle. And Manhattan gave you an attitude. The Bronx? The Bronx gave you baseball and a lesson. A kid with a stick can become a king if you sell enough tickets. We didn't talk about the funerals. The city did it for us black cars, respectful traffic, shopkeepers turning signs to closed with a nod and a look that said, "We understand," without details. The priest talked mercy, we talked memory. Then we folded our handkerchiefs and went back to work because grief is expensive. On summer nights, we bought ices from a cart ringed with little paper flags. Lemon burned clean, cherry stained your lips for hours like a secret you couldn't stop telling. We leaned on stoops, read the racing form like scripture, and argued about heavyweight bouts we couldn't afford to see except in the next day's papers. Newspapers were a nickel sermon with a sports page choir. Phones were heavy as confessions. You called from a booth that smelled like raincoats, jotted an address, and stepped back into the noise like a diver. If the line clicked quiet, you hung up and walked the long way home. If it clicked twice, you went to the meeting and ordered something without ice. I remember the first time a cop called me sir. I checked behind me to see who he meant. The city ages you in spurts. One day you're tossing dice by a lamppost. The next you're careful with your knees and the names you use in public. You start to wrap your sandwiches in yesterday's news so the past doesn't bleed through. We had rules, don't laugh, no kids, no cops, no talk. Stick to them and you lived long enough to wonder whether it mattered. Break them and you didn't live long enough to wonder much at all. People think fear is loud. Mostly it's quiet. It's a chair you don't take, a street you don't cross, a favor you pay early. Food was an alibi. Red sauce on Sundays, always enough for one more plate. Garlic in the pan around 4 meant the house was safe till midnight. We dunked bread like it was medicine and wiped the plate like evidence. On feast days, the saints got carried through the streets on shoulders, and we put cash in the ribbon boxes like we were tipping heaven. The radio was a roommate. News bulletins that tightened your jaw, big bands that loosened it. Who was on first? Cracked tenements in half with laughter. We gathered around a wood cabinet like it was a fireplace and let the announcer tell us who we were supposed to be that evening. Sometimes we listened. Sometimes we went out instead. The 1939 World's Fair landed in Queens like a postcard from tomorrow. We walked past the Trilon in the perisphere and tried to imagine a world with smoother corners and fewer deaths. A robot waved, a television winked. We ate something called a hot dog on a stick and decided progress tastes like mustard. Coney Island was where you learned that joy could be loud. The cyclone threw you at the sky and handed you back laughing. The boardwalk smelled like salt, beer, and decisions you promised not to make again. We didn't swim much. We posed, towels on shoulders, hair slicked, chest out, the city's version of a vacation. Winter in New York is a judge. Snow made saints of the rooftops and devils of the gutters. We wore wool like armor and newspapers in our shoes like a secret handshake with the cold. The L clanged, the taxis fishtailed, and the corner newsstand steamed like a soup kettle. You survived it. That was the reward. Some nights I stood on a fire escape and watched the city breathe. A million windows, a million little stages. A girl ironing a dress. A man counting coins. A couple not talking because they didn't need to. The city teaches you to mind your business and remember it anyway. I'll tell you something we all knew. The difference between a sinner and a citizen was paperwork. One had a badge in his wallet. The other had a number in his head. Both drank the same coffee, kissed the same babies at weddings, and put the same 2 fingers to their hat brim when the priest walked by. Baseball was the city's second language. Even men who couldn't read a ledger could quote a batting average. We had arguments like epic poems about who owned summer. Brooklyn swore the Dodgers were family. The Bronx pointed at the scoreboard and didn't need to swear at all. We placed polite bets and impolite ones. If you got sick, a doctor came with a bag that smelled like camphor and finality. He told you to rest and your mother to boil water. It helped, the water. Mostly it helped her. A week later, you were back on the stoop arguing about points on a loan or points on a spread like the world was simple and math was honest. The city at 3 a.m. is the truth. Street sweepers talking philosophy. A baker's first tray of rolls fogging a window. A saxophone leaking from an upstairs room where somebody is trying to make a living on luck and lung capacity. We walked softer then. The night let you pass if you respected its quiet. We fixed things. Radios with new tubes, shoes with new soles. A man who could mend was worth 2 who could buy. The Depression taught you that dignity is just competence with a collar on. We didn't toss much. We kept drawers full of string and rubber bands because you never knew when the world would ask you to improvise. You want the moral? The city makes you, and it bills you. It lends you swagger and collects in humility. I did things I don't brag about, and a few I do. I stood at the back of more churches than front doors. I learned to say, I'm sorry with cash and thank you with silence. I learned that loyalty is a kind of math you do in your chest. If I close my eyes, I can still hear it, the nickel in the turnstile, the L like a steel zipper, the Savoy floorboards arguing with a drummer, the whisper of a backroom door, the radio promising a better Thursday. People talk about the 30s like they were sepia. Not to me. To me, they were color-deep blues in Harlem, brick reds in Brooklyn, the hard white of winter light on the East River, and the gold of the street lamp catching a young man's face before he learns the cost of it.